Welcome back to Me, Myself and Mental Health. This is episode 11 and today I'm going to be talking about empathy, or more so being an empath. I think everyone knows what empathy is, but what does it mean to be an empath? It's basically someone who feels everything, who feels other people's feelings and energies and vibes, and it might sound a bit hippy dippy, but it's a very real thing. I know lots of people who are empaths. I certainly am, which I don't think would surprise many of you, given sort of, the things I do like this. But there's good and bad sides to it, particularly when it comes to your mental health. So I'll give you an example of the good side of it. I, believe it or not, I'm actually generally quite a shy person. When you meet me for the first time, unless I'm intoxicated, chances are I haven't got a lot to say. I will usually sort of bounce off who I'm with. And if you look at the company I keep, one person in particular, we all know who it is, usually a character who is more naturally sort of vibrant and extroverted than myself, because I can kind of vibe off of that. In having someone around me who's so big and so out there, I eventually kind of warm up to the same thing. I ramp myself up and I pick up that same warmth and energy and vibrancy. But it works both ways. I'm someone who can walk into a room and kind of instantly pick up the atmosphere. I know generally within seconds whether I'm going to like someone or what my feelings about someone are. And that doesn't often change drastically. Sometimes I might pick up a bit of a bad vibe from someone who's just going through it, and eventually it turns out that they're pretty decent. But I have very good instincts about people, and 9 times out of 10 I'm right with my first instinct. So when you're around, people like Stefan, who is very vibrant and out there, it's easy to become more sociable than you naturally are, to sort of feel a bit more relaxed in a social environment, largely because you're not at the center. You can go into places that have a lot of bad history and instantly feel that energy, that kind of darkness that comes with it. And generally speaking, life can be very overwhelming because you instinctively want to support people and be there for people, very often at the detriment of your own well-being. I know I certainly take on my friends' upset. I like to be there for people as much as I can and give a shoulder to cry on. But often it can take me a while to recognize that because I am starting to mirror their feelings, I'm getting burnt out by it. I might react to that in a way of like just not wanting to be around them or finding them frustrating or exhausting. And I don't always instantly recognize the fact of this because my level of empathy has pulled their feelings onto me. Sometimes I just think, I don't really like you right now, and it's not the case. And it's why like going out and going to parties and that is the best and worst experience. If I've been on a high and been around people who are, vibrating at a high frequency, then I can become the life of the party and I can love it and I can get really into it and just be like, like a human firework. But if I've spent a lot of time around people with a different energy and then I try and force myself into a social environment, I find it really exhausting because I then pick up on the negative people in the room. My focus doesn't go to the people who are up here. It goes to the people who are on a low buzz, because that's what the wave I've been riding at the time. It kind of tunes into anxiety when you're in a social environment, because you pick up what everyone's feeling and you can't switch it off. It makes me sound like I'm being all Professor Xy and talking like I'm a telepath. I'm not, obviously, but I can feel like that. You can feel like you're picking up on absolutely everyone around you sometimes, and that's fucking exhausting, like really exhausting, particularly if someone's dark and twisty, and even more so if someone's being dark and twisty when everyone else is on good vibes because they will suck the energy out of you. And they won't intend to all the time. Sometimes, yes. But it happens. When you are one of those people that feels other people's feelings so much, whether it's on a more intimate one-to-one scale or in a big crowd, how do you look after yourself? For me, I used to have to isolate myself. Like I had to a couple of days a week just basically not be around anyone. I'm less like it now because I'm more conscious of who I have or whose energy I have around me and in my life and space. But particularly when I worked behind bars full time, I really had to shut myself away a lot because that is a really difficult environment. I've said environment so much. It's a really difficult place to be when you are an empath, because not only do you have all of your colleagues around you who are constantly tired or hungover or on a come down or stressed, lots of different energies there, but you're non-stop interacting with other people, and a lot of the time you have to put on the hospo smile and be cheerful even when you're not. So having to fake your feelings when you're feeling your own and everyone else's, it fries your brain, and you have to really take time for yourself. A lot of people who are empaths drink a lot or do other things because, well, the same as a lot of people who have alcohol or drug problems, it's numbing pain, and sometimes with high levels of empathy, you're switching the sound down of other people. I certainly got to the point where I had to stop working behind bars full time, particularly because where I was at the time, there was a lot of strong personalities. It became quite overwhelming, quite overbearing. After I finished on the bar, I didn't do any work for 3 weeks. I just spent time going on walks or sitting at the beach. And that's a thing of grounding yourself, as I said, I've said previously when talking about panic attacks, grounding yourself. Empaths get in nature, get amongst the trees, take your shoes and socks off, put your feet in the sea or on sand or on grass, and just sort of reconnect to something other than other people's feelings, other people's vibes. And even now, like I manage it far better. But when I'm at home, I tend to spend a lot of time in my room because I'm a more naturally sociable person than I used to be now that I sort of got more of a hold on how I manage the feelings. But by the time I get home, I'm still pretty burnt out. Every aspect of my job is I work with and alongside a lot of people and plan parties and I'm in public spaces a lot. So by the time I actually get home, it's kind of like hide away a little bit and just defrag from the day and from the people. But so far that's all just been, I've just mostly spoken about the negative side and the stressful side, but I also kind of really love it going back to sort of the beginning of this video, talking about, my best friend and his high energy and how I kind of vibe off of that. There's also the fact that I do form really, really honest relationships with people quite easily, and I know that a lot of people feel very safe and comfortable talking to me about very real things early on, and I put that down to my level of empathy, to my level of understanding. I think people are aware that when I am showing an interest, that it's real, and that if I'm not, it's because I don't have the capacity. And that again is something that's just kind of come around from being upfront with it and explaining it to people and becoming familiar enough with how it works for me to let people know that you're just not vibing. And similarly with everything else, sort of once you learn how to deal with it and how it works for you in good and bad ways and how to look after yourself in between, then you kind of get to actually use it, rather than it just happening, rather than just walking into places and suddenly being incredibly overwhelmed by everyone. You get to decide that you're gonna put yourself in good places with people on a good buzz and feed off that and have a good time, and you get to decide to give your energy to people who need it without taking on too much of yourself and giving too much of yourself. It gets to become a really nice part of your life. I love it now. I've learned how to look after myself in between most of the time. I've learned how to give the energy to people without leaving none for myself, and I've learned how to interact with people on a good buzz, and make that work for myself. But like everything, it took some practice, a really long time. I just used to not really understand what was going on, why I could just walk into a room in a good mood and suddenly be in a bad mood, and I acted out like I'm sassy now, we all know, but I was fighty. Like I was an angry person. I was always really overwhelmed by everything, and I hung around with some people who we weren't particularly good to each other. I felt that a lot. Like I could start an argument with anyone over anything, because I just always felt almost like someone was like holding onto my shoulders and sort of squeezing me, pushing me down kind of thing. I just felt like a level of pressure, but like a real negative pressure, and it came out in shouting and meanness and not in a very productive way. So I'm glad that I've got a hold on that by taking the time to read about these things and to look after myself and distribute my energies more evenly. And in getting familiar with my empathy has been a part of my mental health recovery. Done a lot of reading, and that's where I kind of discovered what being an empath means. And when I started looking at that and looking at some of my behaviors, I kind of linked the two together, and it really helped me sort of punish myself less, I guess. I used to, as I sort of just said, I used to be really angry and intense and aggressive. I just put all of that down to just me being a bit broken and a bit of an asshole. When I was at my worst mental health and still having empathy, it felt like having exposed nerves sometimes when it was in a negative environment. But once I realised that I was an empath and felt these things, I could look a bit closer at what was me and what was my environment, and sort of hate on myself a bit less, and keep the right people around me. As I said, I formed good relationships really quickly, but before I had a sort of hold on what I was doing, I also couldn't put a brakes on those relationships sometimes. I'd fall for people so easily and think that I had feelings for them, and I didn't. I just had positive empathy with them, and until I understood what that was, I was a bit like just all over the place with it. And I see friends of mine now who are empaths, who you can just see when they've had a day of other people, like they can start their day bright as anything and finish it just completely washed out, and not because anything particular has happened, but just because they've been on a complete emotional roller coaster where someone else's feelings are in charge of the ride. And to those people, I'm just like, you've got to take time out from people, which is hard because, again, you're a naturally sociable person, because when you get the good buzz, you want to keep finding that, but you can't guarantee that you're going to find it. So you need to take time to reset and have yours be the only frequency that you're vibing with. Even if it's only once a week, it can be enough to just take yourself out of loud noises, out of a city, out of work, out of being around people, and just zone out. But yeah, generally, if you ever see me like at the beginning of a night, beginning of a party, I'm usually looking a little bit flustered or clueless. That's because I'm tuning into kind of the people and the vibe of what's going on and trying to balance myself out a bit and tune back into myself. It's something that I think I've got down now. Yeah, that's just a part of who I am now. It has its good and bad things like everything else. But like everything else, I learn how to make it work for me. And that's it for this one. Next time we are going to be talking about body image.